All right, welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Without Borders. Pretty excited today. I have Don Zhu, who is a headhunter and recruiter, but also does real estate investing. And just to give a little background on this, I was just kind of scrolling TikTok the other day. The internet's a crazy place in 2023, and came across a video that Don did about, being a landlord and real estate investing, and I thought it was very interesting, and I'm very happy that she came on and looking forward to this conversation. Before we get started, Don, how are you doing?
Great, Fletcher. Thank you for reaching out. I love talking about real estate. So just happy to answer any questions you got for me and share some insights.
Cool. Well, yeah, just to give a little background, how did you get into real estate, rentals and being a landlord?
Yeah, so when I was young in my teens, my mom was buying triple deckers in Boston. And it was not the best place, but it really taught me a lot about real estate, just watching her run her rentals. And it's a grind, right? So, like, I saw that from a very young age and was like, it's a good way to build wealth. A lot of immigrants actually in America in the 90s and the 2000s were buying up property. So this is very common. And I just thought this is genius, right? Like, you buy a house, it appreciates, you're building your wealth in a different way. So I always had that in the back of my mind. Then my mom pretty much cashed out all her US holdings and bought even more real estate in China in the 2000s. She made a lot of money doing that. And so when I got to be, eventually all the money was reinvested into a failed venture, but I just remember, wow, like, real estate is a pathway to make wealth, right? It's like totally doable. You can create intergenerational wealth. You just got to find the right place, right price, get in and make your money. And so when I got into the workforce, I started making money, and my goal was always to use the money that I saved to put into a down payment into real estate investing specifically, not necessarily primary home buying, but truly investing with real estate. So that's always been the goal from a very young age.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot right there. I come from the same thought process that, like, real estate just a great wealth generating asset for people. And that's part of the reason we're talking today, is that I believe you started investing in real estate maybe, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, maybe a little bit. And it was a different time. And that's
Mhm.
really, I had the benefit too, that I was able to use family capital to start in that time frame as well, right around like 2010-ish. And it was just different, so it is a great way. And this is another part of your video too, is like a lot of people are shooting out this story that, investing in real estate is just very passive. You buy it, somebody sends you a check, everybody's happy and the show goes on, and you retire early because you start building up this wealth. But it's a lot different than that. So rental properties are not as glorious as they look, correct? And have you felt that it's gotten harder recently?
Well, it was hard even back then, right? Like, it's just a grind. Real estate itself is just a grind because somebody has to do all the work. So either you outsource it or you do it yourself. So in my teens, I was out there whacking weeds, cleaning up dead rats, helping my mom weld, the boiler or whatever the hell she was working on, and painting walls, scraping walls, applying compound. Like, I know how to do that stuff. Right. So even from a very young age, I was like, this is not as passive as these people make it sound. And when in my 20s, my parents at that point were doing something else. Like I told you, that venture that eventually failed. So they had all their money locked up. What I was thinking was, I'm going to invest differently than my mom. Like, the way she did it, she was basically kind of like for lack of a better word, slumlord. I was like, well, I can't get away with being a slumlord because the regulations are much harder now, right? Just the amount of oversight the government has. You can't like chop up rooms and rent them out to individuals. Like, that's just not legal in a lot of states. So when I came into real estate investing, I was like, let me start off really small. And when you start off small, it's not that hard. Like, if you start off small and you have a condo, it's not that hard. So I started off investing in condos. That wasn't hard. Like, you don't have to fix much, right? You can just outsource a lot of that stuff. it's like when you start owning multifamilies, when you start getting into the bigger projects, that's when the costs and the labor really start adding up because the project just gets more complicated. So I think real estate has always been a hard grind job. It's never been easy. And it's just a choice. Are you going to DIY it? Are you going to pay someone else to do it? Which is why I tell people you need to have money to do real estate. Like you can't get into it if you just, it's not like buying a stock. You can get away with just buying a portion of a stock. When you buy a house, a real estate asset, it's your full responsibility. And the costs can really add up very quickly, whether it was back then or now. Obviously, now with inflation, with labor inflation, with materials inflation, it's just even worse, where you really got to make sure that you have the money to carry your asset. So I think it's just gotten tougher because real estate has risen for the most part in most cities, and investors have to go further out. Like my mom back then, she could invest in Dorchester. You can't invest in Dorchester today as a normal person, right? So if you're just a normal person without like gobs and gobs of family money, then you have to go further out because you can't buy anything under really 800,000 or 900,000 in Boston anymore, right? Boston is so expensive now. So I think the market has changed a lot in that sense, but in sense of the actual labor, the effort of running a real estate property, I think it still has always been labor intensive, even though people may make it sound to be less labor intensive.
Yeah, exactly. That's the old sweat equity. I remember it's like Mardi Gras in New Orleans where we had our properties. That's where I'm from. And like, painting and just chiseling, fixing up the property, and thought I
Yeah.
deserved like some gold medal because I was doing all this work. But no, that's just part of it. And yeah, scaling up is not the easiest thing, but at some point you either like graduate from that and you delegate it, or it just becomes more and more of a responsibility. And another thing that is costs adding up. People don't factor in insurance, property taxes. For example, like I know people that are looking to buy in Florida and the hurricane insurance, so you
Oh,
have all these costs that just keep
oh
going
yeah.
up too. So
Right.
it's, once again, it's not, like you said, it's not a stock where you just buy it and you wake up 5 years later and sell it if you want to, and you haven't done anything. It very
Right.
much is an active thing. Do you have
Mhm.
any, what locations do you have property in?
So right now I've been slimming down my property holdings. But like right now I have Baltimore, Vermont. I have a few properties and upstate New York. But I've gone as far as like Aurora, Colorado, DC, Massachusetts. So I've invested in all sorts of different places. I start off New York, then Jersey, and then just kind of grew from there. But now I'm really trying to get rid of some of the long-term rental holdings that I have. I'm down to my last one that I need to get rid of in Baltimore. So sometimes I'm just at a place where I'm shuffling out my portfolio, and now I'm going to really focus on upstate New York and southern Vermont, and that's pretty much going to be my niche now moving forward.
Okay, nice. And in your video, you were talking about, you know, favorable tenant laws. And it seems to me, especially through the pandemic, a lot of areas, like I know a lot of people that own real estate in Seattle. And in order to get somebody out that wasn't paying rent, they literally had to do it under the guise that they were actually moving in themselves. So do you
Mhm.
see, on top of properties getting more expensive, like you just were referring to, do you see more favorable tenant laws kind of spreading more throughout the United States and making it a little bit harder, or I would say a little less desirable to be running out?
I think that's just the general public policy direction, whether it's a red state or a blue state. What's happening now, I think, in the US is this massive wealth poor gap. So there's people that have some and people that have nothing. And the amount of people that have nothing, I think, are starting to outpace, like what is available. I genuinely think that the government is pushing housing onto private citizens now. I genuinely think that is the direction that we're headed in. And it's because they're overwhelmed. The government has no solution to the home problem. So they're hoping that making lives more difficult for landlords is actually going to increase housing supply. And ironically, it's not. It's actually going to lead to more housing issues, because if you make landlords' lives harder, then that you decrease the incentive for landlords to rent out their property and or to operate rentals. So I think that this is just an overwhelming sentiment of, in general. I just finished an eviction. The tenant stopped, was on, by the way, COVID was really good for people who didn't have a lot of money. There was lots of free money that governments were giving out, both in Baltimore as well as Vermont. And I was able to, I didn't really lose any money during COVID. And that's because people were getting money from the government. And the government was paying their monthly rent for like a year and a half. So a lot of people got a lot of free money. And I don't think people understand this when you see all the information on TikTok where everyone's hating on landlords. I'm like, no, it's the tenants that get all the free money from the government. Like landlords, really, we don't get anything. It's the government giving the money to the tenants, then that pays us, right? We get the money from all of these subsidies and government support to help people pay their rent. So again, this is government pushing housing requirement, providing housing onto private citizens, isn't it, right? Like there's no obligation for us to do anything, but the government is pushing this upon us. And it makes sense because they are not constructing more affordable residential units or whatever, or they can't meet the demand. Regardless, it's easier and cheaper for the government to just pay somebody else's rent than to have homelessness become a bigger issue. So overall, from whether it's Vermont or Baltimore, you're seeing this happen. And then so now it's really problematic because the last of rental assistance is finally drying up. Like this is the end. There is no more rental assistance moving forward. So this is going to put immense pressure on landlords and tenants to figure out what they're going to do from here on out. I was lucky. I was able to do what I had to do. My properties are fine, but it really, as you know, with evictions and, with issues with tenants, it really is a hit or miss. Every case is going to be different. Sometimes you need a lawyer. Sometimes you can just work it out with the tenant where hopefully they themselves will move out. So I've had both scenarios happen to me just recently.
Yeah, man, I agree with a lot you just said. First of all, the widening wealth gap in the US is something that is very real. And I agree. There's a lot of policy that people think like rent stabilization and I've seen people post on LinkedIn. They're like, this is not good. And I sit there and I'm like, I agree with all the points you're saying, but you're not really understanding that this demographic is slowly becoming a majority. Another thing about the widening wealth gap and the fact that it's like, hey, if people like yourself are disincentivized to invest and create housing for somebody, not only is it going to make it worse, but we're starting to see corporations like Blackstone. I think I was reading an article where it's like 20 to 30% of all rental properties being bought now are done by basically a publicly traded company. So we're becoming even more of a society where not only is home ownership kind of unattainable, but on top of it, corporations are doing that. And then it's just pure profit. So it's like, hey, how fast can we jack up the rent without people getting pissed off? And then it's like, where are we? Where are we in this? And then it's like, well, it's too late it'll be, reactive. Like maybe we should incentivize these landlords or these investors that are going to fix up. I got a buddy who does it in Florida and he posts a lot on LinkedIn. He gets a lot of hate and he'll just post like the photo of what the house was before. The money he put into it was just an abandoned house, like not doing anything. And then he fixes it up. Now it's a rental property. And like all of a sudden he's some terrible guy,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sad to see so much hate. Really, it's the have-not mentality of like just feeling so victimized, and they take it out on people who've been productive, right? Again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, no landlord is walking around with wads of cash just sitting on their bum. Like that's not what's happening. We are out there scrounging, scraping, saving, doing everything we need to do to keep the property like upkept well. And we're responsible people and we've taken a proactive, accountable approach. And yet we are the ones being blamed by people for having done something with our lives, essentially, and being like, no, all of a sudden you're this evil land grabber, land baron. When actually the majority of mom and pop landlords, I would consider myself one of those mom and pop landlords, we are not just sitting on our mounds of cash, just sitting there jacking up rents, screwing people over. The majority of landlords do not have that mentality, because obviously the market doesn't let you just get whatever you want for the property. There's certain limitations to how much you can get for rent.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just say what was your age when you got a first rental property? You're in your 20s?
I was in my mid-20s. I was 25.
Okay. It's about like the same with me. And like I said, I just had the fortune too that I had family capital to help out in a situation where maybe I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. What would you say to somebody? Do you think it's even possible for, let's just say, somebody in their mid-20s who is listening to this that's trying to get into real estate? Do you think it's a lot harder, or it's even reasonable for them to start doing it? What kind of strategy would you recommend for somebody that's trying to build wealth in real estate?
I think it really depends on where you live. So if you live in a tier 3 city, so I have this concept of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. If you live in tier 3 city, it's easy to get into real estate because the houses are still very cheap. If you live in a tier 1 city like New York City, forget about it. like forget about that. And I mean it, just because the prices here are so outrageous that you actually lose money buying property here. And then renting it out, your spread is actually negative spread. So if you live in a tier 3 city where there's a massive spread, you can get in as a young person. My last 2 or 3 real estate properties was all cash purchases under $150,000. You can do that. You just have to go further out. That's why I invest in upstate New York and Vermont. Those are areas, and I find homes that other people don't want to buy, right? So that's where you can get the opportunity. So any young person, absolutely, if you have the down payment money, if you have a good income that you can get your loan, most likely you're going to start off doing a loan like I did. You're going to need the bank. So you need to understand debt to income ratio, all of that. Keep your costs low. You can't have a Maserati, right? You got to be really careful because the bank's going to look at all of your line items to sign you off on a mortgage, right? So you kind of have to understand the system. You can do it. You just can't do it in San Francisco. You just can't do it on Madison Avenue. You can do it in XYZ small town, XYZ state. You can do that, but you need a car. You need a car and you need time. So your weekends, you're going to be driving up there. You're going to be fixing stuff. You're going to be doing things. You're going to be talking to contractors. So you have to make time. That's the thing about real estate. As we said, it's just not really passive. You do have to go there and you have to be present, because there's nothing like an owner that can get stuff done and be responsible in a way that your vendors still need you to lead them and tell them what to do, because you're the one ultimately paying for everything and making the calls. So I think it's still very doable. It's just that you can't do it in a hot, sexy city like Austin or Nashville.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a lot of what I liked about your story was sacrifice. And to be honest, I think that's very much like an immigrant mindset. A lot of people just don't want to. They're looking for it. These people are pitching, hey, get rich with real estate passively. And it's like, nah, they're actually probably either selling you a program or whatever. Yeah, but an area like New York City, it's like those people are just kind of like parking wealth. That's not like they're those types of people that are buying something, close to like Central Park. They're not necessarily looking at the return of the rent coming in. It's like, hey, this is something I'm going to leave to my children. And, I'm getting out. I have so much money in the stock market. Like, why don't I just park some money over here?
Yeah. Yeah, it's more emotional, right? Just like the tie to New York and wanting to get a piece of it. It's not like a young hustler who's trying to like build wealth. Like, nah, you can't do that in Central Park right now. It's the upfront cost you're not gonna have it, right? So it's not feasible for most people in their 20s who don't have any support.
Yeah. Okay, so you spoke about this a little bit. You said you were selling, which I think is actually, especially depending on when you buy the properties and whatnot. What's your strategy going forward? Is it like holding? Are you selling? Do you plan on buying anything more or what?
I'm all set for now because I'm building a 4-family primary residence in Vermont. So that's my big project that I signed on to pretty much last year. It was a 5-family that I purchased that was really in terrible shape. And they actually was 5 different people, different families living in there. And it was so dangerous that we had to knock it down. That was one of the stipulations when I took over the property, was that it has to come vacant because it's actually dangerous for the tenants to be living here. So that project ended up becoming something else because the 5-family was so unstable that we had to demolish it. So I have personally never worked on a home build before. This is going to be my first one. And I'm in a transitionary point of my life where I would love to live in Vermont. So that's kind of the strategy moving forward, is I'm going to go and build this primary 4-family in Vermont. And then, I could use some of the units for myself. And of course, some of the units I could rent either to long-term people as they come along. That's a fit. And that would be the vision for now. That's my main project. That's why I'm kind of cashing out of some of the other locations like Baltimore that I'm invested in. I would rather be more conservative and have the income and the money from that asset versus getting more long-term tenants. Like I said, I just had a guy that left. This was the situation where the tenant was not paying rent for a few months. And he was a guy that was living there since COVID and paid rent, but then he stopped paying rent. So I was too kind to him. And it got to a point where now he finally left. And I'm just kind of done. I'm just kind of done with that whole grind. I just want my money out. I had an original dream that was a brownstone that would go to be millions of dollars. It would be like a new Park Slope, but the neighborhood is just not turning around fast enough. And I'm not going to wait another 10 to 15 years to do that. I'd rather get the cash out now, put it into something else, namely this Vermont property, and just move on. So my strategy now is going to be two-pronged. One is all Airbnbs in the Northeast, as well as my personal primary 4-family residence that I'm going to operate.
Okay, nice. Well, that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask. So short-term rentals are definitely on the table.
Yes. So I've been doing short-term rentals for one of my properties in Vermont since 2019. And I've really enjoyed it. That has been a lifesaver, a freaking lifesaver. So that is how we've been able to upgrade the units. That's how we were able to rebuild the porch, like the awnings and whatnot. It was all because of short-term rental income, because it's very close to a ski mountain, which is why I'm really starting to focus on Vermont. And they really need Airbnbs. They need Airbnbs because the area does not have a lot of hotels. It's very underdeveloped, and there's a humongous demand for housing, both short-term and long-term. So the government in Vermont is a lot more friendly to short-term rental operators as well as landlords in general, because they know that they need to work in cooperation with the landlords in order to keep their cities running.
Yeah, and I mean, just listening to you, that's what I really like about real estate. It's like the Baltimore was a learning experiment, right? But it seems to me like you got something that you're passionate about. And that's when I was raised, it was always my father was like, hey, put your money into like Exxon, put your money into the S&P 500, but there was no like passion there. When you have something that you can physically see like coming in together, like this property you're talking about in Vermont, it's like tangible. You can use it yourself. You're drawn to the area. You like the area. And it just, I don't know, it's so much more fun. And if you can create wealth by doing that, I mean, it's a win-win in my book.
It is a win-win. And like I said, landlords are an essential part of this economy, of how the country runs, right? These are the people that are doing all the dirty, grungy work that other people don't want to do. And then tenants can just move in 1 month's rent and a deposit, and you're good. So this is an incredible value add that landlords are providing. And they're genuinely like rejuvenating these neighborhoods that were previously dying. So Airbnb, short-term rentals, has been a humongous change in a positive way for so many terrible neighborhoods that were really dilapidating and the homes were really crumbling. And who came in to save the day? It was short-term rental operator individuals. I saw that firsthand, how much short-term rentals have rejuvenated neighborhoods that the homes were not selling. The local population cannot buy. They do not qualify. They don't have the down payment. They don't have the ability to get loans. And those houses are languishing for 200 days on the market. It was Airbnb people. It was investors from out of state like me that came in and bought these homes, that renovated these badly terrible homes like your friend in Florida, right? It's these people that are coming in to do the work, spend the money, fix it so that actually someone can use it.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any, each area is different? For example, like here in Cabo, it's like when people do an Airbnb, it's not necessarily taking a home or a condo away from a local. In New Orleans, where my buddy, I think he got up to, we were jokingly calling him a Monopoly guy. I think he got up to like 60 short-term rentals.
Wow.
And then they fired back with, and some of these we were like, dude, where are you buying? Like, this is the hood. And it turned around and like he looked like a genius. So hats off to him. But then, like 2 years later, they have all these regulations coming in because a lot of people, and this is like, a party destination, so the guy's like waking up, going to school, and there's like a bachelor party going next door, or you got money coming in from, like, a lot of money was New York money was coming to buy Airbnbs, and they're like, oh, they're gentrifying this like really, really nice or neighborhood that has a lot of culture. Do you see any of that happening in the areas where you would be? Because it sounds to me like where you are, you're actually like helping. So like people couldn't complain about that.
I think that there is such a negative connotation with gentrification, but this is the way the world works when things are getting better. And this happens in every single country and every single state and every single city and block. Like, gentrification is a good thing because it actually brings more economic opportunities to everyone in that local area. But let's be clear on who is winning from gentrification. The people who are winning from gentrification are the people who are going to work. The people who are winning are the people who are putting in effort and who are actually applying themselves, taking advantage of the new economic opportunities coming into their area. Those are the people that are going to win. The people who just want to sit there and complain about it, they're going to lose. And they have always lost, because that is a losing mentality, no matter where you live, whether it's San Francisco or whatever neighborhood you live in. That's a losing mentality. So what's happened in the Southern Vermont area is tons of locals benefited. But who? The workers, the people who apply themselves, the entrepreneurial people who said, I'm going to paint walls today. I'm going to go and cut grass today. I'm going to go and get rid of pests for you today. I'm going to go and come in and cut trees today. Those are the people that are financially profiting, who are locally based off of this new incoming blood. Because prior to this incoming blood, there was no economic opportunity. This is a dead space. There's nothing going on. It's a junkie-filled town. There was some really serious drug issues where people just had no economic opportunity, nothing to do, no economic opportunity. So when people came in and said, hey, I'm going to need a cleaner, and you get $150 to clean a house that if you worked at Walmart all day, you would make, what, $90? But here you make $150 per clean, and I've got 4 units for you, and this is happening 4 times a month. Do the math. How much easier is it to just be a cleaner for Airbnbs right now? They're making freaking hand over fist cash, and lots of them get paid cash money. And they're, you know what I mean? So all the people complaining about gentrification are not participating in the labor. And that's why they're missing out. Everybody else is profiting hand over fist. My contractor gets paid $60,000 a year from me alone. He's telling me that the plumber and the electrician are so busy that they don't even have time to call back customers on the phone. That's how busy these folks are. There's no immigrant labor in Vermont. It's all local labor. They're the ones profiting. It's the local counties and towns that are winning off of this external money. So when people complain about gentrification, I'm just like, you clearly are not applying yourself, which is why you're missing out on the biggest wealth creation opportunity that's hit your town since 1995. You know what I mean? So like, I'm just like, come on. Like, of course, if you're just going to sit there and complain and continue working at Walmart for minimum wage, of course you're going to complain about this, because there's nothing to do with you. And all you're going to see is your friends and buddies getting rich, and you're jealous of them now. So you see, this victim mindset is the real issue here. And that's why the wealth gap is widening. It's because it's harder and harder to keep yourself motivated when there's social media creating so much misery and victimhood. right? There's so much noise instead of the positive shit, which is like, guys, guess what? There's still hope left. Oh, did you wonder that? There's still hope left in the world. Guess what? There's still some positivity if you could just shift your mindset.
Yeah.
And that's why I was able to buy real estate in my mid-20s in New York freaking City. It's because I didn't subscribe to this victim mindset. And I was like, I'm going to go where no one else wants to go. I'm going to do the dirty things that nobody else wants to do. I'm going to invest in the neighborhoods that are so gross. Nobody wants these homes. I'm going to come in and do that. So that's why when you asked earlier, do 20-year-olds have an opportunity? Absolutely they do. But it's like, how far are you willing to go for this? Every single weekend? Or do you want to go hang out with your friends at the club?
Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that. Unfortunately, I do think I don't know, we'll see. It just feels like a lot of people are subscribing to that victimhood, mentality, which is, the same type of people that you had to evict. And those are the same type of people there's so much opportunity. Everybody knows this. It's just, anyway, I'm kind of pivoting off script here. I'm curious. Like, it's pretty inspiring to hear how you're investing. Do you pretty much do you invest in stocks too, or is it pretty much all real estate? Okay.
Nope. I'm a stock investor. I'm a crypto investor. I have my own recruitment business. So I got multiple lines of income.
Nice. Good for you. Good for you. But real estate, you would say, is probably your favorite?
Real estate is where I park my wealth. So the majority of my money is spent on maximizing my real estate opportunity. But nowadays, I think it really is about diversification. At the outset, real estate is how I really jumped up in my net worth at the outset. But now it's more about really maximizing short-term revenue, yearly revenue from the Airbnbs. So that's really the game now. Is how can I maximize the earning potential per unit versus buying more units? So you know what I mean? Because buying more units, back to our original conversation, is actually more expensive now. And the upkeep of each individual unit is actually really high. So the best solution is scaling. So buying and building 4 families is way better than single homes, So now it's just about truly scalability and maximization. And then also just doing other things, diversifying into cryptos, stocks, just having more liquid opportunities too, instead of what I did before, which was almost 100% real estate, which is a very dangerous place to be. I wouldn't recommend that to most people.
Yeah. Okay. I could keep you on for a while, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. So I'll go maybe 2 or 3 more. I saw you mentioned something about coaches, and it's funny. That was another thing that resonated with me. People that are pushing that real estate is this passive game. And can you just give an example of something that you've come across? Possibly, I'd say it's probably on social media, somebody just kind of a blatant lie in order to try to either get you to buy a course or buy into something that they're selling.
There's 2 main scams that really concern me. One of them is really obvious when they're hey, I'm just going to teach you how to buy something with 0 money down. That's always immediately a scam, because it's real estate is not a 0 money down sort of thing. And if you're playing like that, you're going to lose your house. You will lose the investment 100% if your budget is as close to 0 as possible. So I always tell people, real estate, you really have to have a good regular source of cash money, because anything could happen to your house. And people are yeah, but once you own it, you're kind of good. And I'm no. Owning it is just the beginning. Your problems haven't even started yet. What happens is year 1, year 2, year 3, that's the problem. It's not buying the property. Buying the property is the easy part, right? So it always concerns me when people are here's how you could do real estate with little to no money. I'm ooh, that's a lie. The next one is, here, give me your money. I'll invest it for you in my portfolio. That is Ponzi scheme, immediately Ponzi, because it's I know how these margins work and they're not so good. It's barely enough to keep the homeowner who owns the property profitable, let alone enough to freaking share with hundreds of people. So that's what really scares me, is this proliferation of companies backed by very big people, like big, entrepreneurs who are like, hey, give us $30,000. You can buy into this home in Arizona and then you get a dividend. What happens when the music stops and the chairs disappear? Because I'm like, the margins are not there. That only works if you got a bunch of people putting in money at the same time where you can pay off the people. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? So I'm just like, that is a humongous red flag, because I know how thin the margins are. They're not that great. And then you look at their acquisition costs. They're like, oh, I got this single family for $500,000 and you're going to get a nice little dividend. It's like, how much is the rent? Like, where's the profit? Like, where's the monthly revenue that you speak of, considering the house actually rents for $3,000? Where is the profit sharing? How is that happening? It's happening from all the people throwing their money in, like a classic Ponzi scheme. So I'm just very concerned when I see these valuation metrics. Like, I got the 4-family I'm telling you about, I got a 20% down, 5% interest or something like that, $145,000 acquisition costs. Every single year to upkeep the home, I have to pay like $50,000 just because it's the older house. You need to upkeep it. You have to build new units. You have to upgrade things. And that's a short-term rental doing very, very well a year. And I'm like, there's not $5,000-$6,000 worth to share and spread that money out to a bunch of investors. The money isn't just, that's not how it's built up. That's just barely enough to keep me happy, right? Let alone split it amongst like hundreds of people on the internet. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, no, a lot of the Vermont deal that you're talking about, a lot of times, I think in like years, you come and you're like, wow, this is appreciated, but it's not this get rich quick scheme that people are pitching.
No, because you can only cash in your equity gain when you sell the house. So when you don't sell the house and you're paying people out of your cash coffers, when you do sell the house, you already pre-distributed your future equity gain. So how, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're using today's money to pay for tomorrow's hopeful profit. But as we all know, interest rates are on the rise. So it's just like, I just can't see that being anything other than a Ponzi scheme. Because I'm like, where's the money coming from? Like, where's the profit that people are talking about?
All right, I got one more. Done. I'm going to say that like 10 more times, and this is the last one. All right. Just your opinion on this. Could you see, how do you see home ownership in the next like 5-10 years? Do you think it'll be harder and harder to buy a place? And then do you think like corporations, like I was mentioning earlier, do you see that type of that becoming more of a reality where you have less and less mom and pops and more bigger shops, which to me equals disaster long term, because it's just going to turn into like a spreadsheet. There's no passion, and like that's just the recipe for like a 2008. But also, do you think there's going to be less and less people getting home, especially in these like larger cities where you have work? That's such an open-ended question, but just curious.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on that. So the primary homeowner who is buying at all costs to own due to an emotional need, they're always losing. They've been losing for the last decade. These primary homeowners are the biggest culprit, even beyond Blackstone, right? I always get BlackRock and Blackstone confused. Yeah, or beyond Brookfield, whatever. Like, it's the primary homeowners who have jacked up the price of every single metropolitan city. It's because I live here, I work here, I need to buy at all costs, even though it makes zero sense to do so. So it's my biggest hope that primary homeowners, that you will wake the F on up. That what happened to your parents is never going to happen to you. You are buying at an outrageously inflated price, and please stop. Like, that is my genuine hope, because the corporations, they really can't do much. They're not professional property managers. And I think in terms of housing supply, and you can fact check me on this, it's just a gut feeling. I think there's actually more homes than there are actual people living. Right? There's more homes than there are people in America. And the reason why I say this is because the last few years, due to the insane low interest rate, the amount of new building, the new builds have been astronomical. So it is a phenomenal time to be a renter right now. And I'm like, primary homeowners, wake the F on up. Unless you have a high school kid who needs to go to the best school district, you can get by with being a renter. You can get by being a renter, ideally renting from a nice landlord who isn't a big conglomeration, but like an individual mom and pop landlord, and you can win. You can win by keeping your costs low. The landlord wins because they have a solid tenant that pays on time. Like, that's my honest to God hope, is that primary homeowners will change their buying behavior so that we will stop engaging in these outrageous bidding wars that make zero sense. And I think that will be helped by the limitations that the government, I know, is looking at, limiting foreign buyers. Because obviously everybody, this is a humongous change too in the last 10 years and last 20 years, is that rich people from other countries have come to the USA to buy up prime real estate, just like they did in Vancouver, right? Vancouver, and I'm Chinese, so I will call my Chinese folks out. A lot of Chinese people got insanely rich in the last generation. They have had the money to purchase prime real estate in many towns and cities. And so you got a lot of rich people owning homes that they don't use, similar to what's happening in Israel with the rich Americans who buy land in Israel and they don't live in their luxury mansions, but they own them and they're just sitting vacant. Same thing's happening in America. So this happens globally. This is not a unique to America situation. So what happens then is now you got all of these foreign buyers also raising up the prices of luxury homes, of nice homes in nice cities. So the solution for everybody is to stop making bad financial decisions. That's the solution for everyone. Everyone who isn't crazy rich, who doesn't own a factory, everyone who just has a regular 9-to-5 job needs to wisen up and shift their whole entire like financial education mindset. Is like, why should I buy a house that rents for less than what I'm paying on a mortgage, just to what? Build equity? Have you even looked at an amortization schedule, right? So it's just like, do you even know what you're doing? And most primary owned homeowners don't. They're just, I need to own where I live. I need to live where I own. This is what my parents told me. I won't waste money on rent. I cannot believe how many people still believe in this garbage, including many well-educated people that I know. And I'm like, why can't you just do the simple math? You're not actually building any equity because your mortgage is mostly interest for the first 10 to 15 years of the lifetime of the loan, right? And then if you get a condo, you're paying money to the HOA for no good reason. That money you do not get back in form of equity, right? So I just genuinely hope primary homeowners stop the silliness. It's really their fault. It's not, so like people are like, it's Airbnb owners' faults for jacking up home rates in certain locations. It's not. Airbnb home investors are cheap. We would never overpay, like, because the margin is not there. So investors are the last people to bid up locations. Maybe the flippers, but the flippers are a very small portion of investors, and they're also small time. Most flippers aren't bajillionaires. So yeah, that's sort of my view, is that all of it just comes down to lack of financial education, an adherence to outdated real estate ownership sentiment that no longer makes any sense in today's market at all. Awesome. You're better off buying a high yield, you're better off getting a high yield savings account for most people,
Nice. Well, I like that answer.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you so Dan. Sorry.
Yeah. And then the last thing is the smart people who understand the economic environment and can pivot and are not emotionally manipulated. Those are the people that will win every single generation, every single decade, every single year, because they're not being manipulated by their sense of victimhood or their lack of hope or their fear. They can actually see opportunities as they present themselves, and they can actually see past all of that scary noise, and they can see logically this does or does not make sense. Those are the people that are going to win every single year. And unfortunately, for some odd reason, they're just not a big conglomerate of our existing population, because most people are mainstream. They go with the mainstream way of thinking instead of thinking beyond what you were taught by your parents or society or your economics professor, who is now 2 generations removed from what's going on today and tomorrow.
Nice. Dan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome.
plug time. If anybody's listening wants to get in touch, real estate, recruiting, whatever, how would they do so?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's
Uh,
where, well, for recruiting, I'm very, very niche. So I won't apply to like 99.99999% of people. But like if you want coaching, I definitely do coaching. All of that is on my website, dondonzoo.com. It's the easiest way to get hold of me. Easy way. I publish a blog on there. I publish daily on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a good place to follow me. But I have two podcasts. One is Daily Don Don, and the other one is DG Recruit Podcast. The DG Recruit Podcast is obviously all about recruiting, but the Daily Don Don has more about like life and careers and, you know, real estate investing. So the best is to look at all of those resources, which is all on my website, dondonzoo.com. If you need coaching, if you want one-on-one support, I do have an hourly rate that I charge, and you're free to reach out, and I'm happy to share with you some ideas. In the future, I will be creating courses. I will be publishing my first book this year. All of that's going to be on my website, dondonzoo.com.
Damn, you are busy. I thought I was busy, but nice, cool. Well, I will drop the link dondonzoo.com so everybody can check it out. And thank you so much for your time today, Don Don.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fletcher.
Thanks.